Shock rippled through the world of artificial intelligence when Beijing blocked Meta's $2 billion acquisition of Chinese startup Manus. The message was stark and unmistakable. Chinese tech firms remain firmly in the state's grip. It doesn't matter where they operate. The Meta move in April came hard on the heels of new Chinese supply chain security laws that effectively outlaw decoupling. That's the process of reducing economic, technological and strategic interdependence, aiming to make Western economies less reliant on China. The new law said, move production out of China and you could lose access to the market altogether. What makes these new rules different is not just that China wants to protect its economy, it's that increasingly Beijing wants influence over decisions companies make outside China too. China's move to force Meta to unwind its acquisition of Manus shows Beijing's willingness to use its economic muscle to safeguard its key interests. The timing was highly symbolic, as it took place just weeks before US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are due to have a summit. The ripple effects have been immediate. Cross-border tech deals face a chill. China-born entrepreneurs may find themselves permanently tethered to Beijing's oversight. And global companies must now weigh not just opportunity, but political risk. The regulations are set against the backdrop of increasing tension between China's global trade dependence and President Xi Jinping's mandate for national self-reliance. Under Xi Jinping, the Chinese Communist Party is defining technology as part of national security, especially artificial intelligence. Beijing is planning to restrict US investment in Chinese technology firms, again, particularly in AI. China's made major progress on innovation and adoption of AI. But in China, you have access to less compute, less capital, and salaries are lower than in the West. Most of the business opportunities in AI are in the US, where spending is forecast to reach $1 trillion on AI by 2027.
You attract this talent, but you keep it there. It is not possible that then the talent creates a company that is sold to the US and the talent also leaves to the US. That loophole cannot happen. So a way to do this is indeed this legislation, partially. I mean, there's a lot of other ways, but this legislation is very important because what it says is, I can license everything from my supply chain, not only rare earth, which we obviously know how it worked and what it actually achieved in the summit between Xi and Trump, a lot of gains for China out of these export controls, but now it could be anything.
Think of the global economy as a high-stakes marriage between China and the West. For decades, the West provided the capital and the tech, and China became the world's factory. But rising geopolitical tensions, security concerns, and trade disputes have pushed both sides towards what policymakers are now calling de-risking. Europe, the US, and other Western countries have sought to separate or reduce their economic dependence on China. To reduce risk, companies have moved factories to places like Vietnam or India, reshored them, restricted high-end computer chips, and blocked investments in Chinese tech. And hefty tariffs on Chinese goods have accelerated the process of decoupling. China is pushing back. Beijing already uses targeted measures, like restricting critical minerals that the West needs and blacklisting US firms. On April the 7th, China's State Council, which is the country's cabinet, published the Regulations on Industrial and Supply Chain Security, with immediate effect. A set of rules that on the surface looks like boring paperwork, but a closer look and we see that China is armor-plating its supply chains with these new rules.
What stands out from China's approach is certainly, I think, the broad scope of the rules and the sweeping nature of the measures China's government may choose to take in response to conducts deemed to threaten the PRC's industrial base. These are spelled out so broadly that they may include ordinary commercial practices, such as European companies switching away from a Chinese supplier, for instance. So this is effectively meant to deter and derail de-risking measures, such as those that the EU and member states, including Germany, have been taking to reduce economic dependence on China.
The West is trying to decouple from China. Beijing says there could be a high price for that. China's latest new rules are partly in response to Europe's efforts to cope with what economists call the second China shock. With the US cranking up tariffs to record levels, China's diverting its massive industrial surplus directly into European ports, flooding European markets with e-vehicles, electronics and industrial machinery. The trade relationship has become wildly lopsided. In 2025, the EU's trade deficit with China hit a staggering 360 billion euros. By February, the deficit was over $1 billion a day. The EU sees this imbalance as a threat to Europe's industrial competitiveness and economic security. It's come up with a proposal called the European Industrial Accelerator Act, proposed by the European Commission in March. The main aims of the IAA are to boost European manufacturing and secure supply chains. It contains tough new conditions on Chinese investment in strategic sectors like batteries and solar, including forced technology sharing and local hiring requirements. It includes a made-in-EU rule that steers public contracts and subsidies towards European-made products. And it wants to see fast-track permits to get new European factories built quickly. China has strongly criticised the IAA. It sees the plan as Europe building an economic wall against Chinese industry. Beijing sees the act as a direct threat to China's role at the centre of global supply chains. It describes the IAA as protectionist, as institutional discrimination with serious investment barriers.
To our dismay as Europeans, a reaction, in my view, to the European Industrial Accelerator Act, because the whole idea is that any measure to limit or constrain the use of Chinese inputs in somebody else's supply chain will be seen by China as interference in the well-functioning of China's supply chain. So it's really also, if you want, extraterritorial in some way. It means that whatever we do to protect our market, China may see as a push against its own supply chains.
The EU Chamber of Commerce in China has also been critical of the new supply chain law, warning it gives authorities sweeping powers to investigate and act against companies or individuals it believes are interfering with supply chains.
It's early for us to see exactly how, in more concrete and specific terms, this would be implemented. But what we can see is that it follows a trend that we have been able to see in recent years, that China is beginning to develop an extraterritorial toolbox that looks a little bit like the one that America has had for a while. And that, of course, creates a little bit of anxiety amongst European companies here, in the sense that we have all seen how it has worked with the US extraterritorial rule book, that has been something that has given rise to added complexity for businesses. And of course, if we have a similar regime being developed in China, we could fear that that would also add to complexity.
The Chamber is especially concerned about the risks faced by individual employees, warning they could be punished through exit bans. China uses these exit bans to prevent both its own citizens and foreign nationals from leaving the country, often for months and even years. These restrictions are frequently used as leverage in civil business disputes. Irish executive Richard O'Halloran was trapped in China from 2019 to 2022 due to a dispute involving the Chinese-owned aircraft leasing firm he worked for. Last year, Wells Fargo banker Chen Yue Mao was barred from leaving China for several months.
We have of course, noticed that in the new regulations, the 834 and the 835, that exit ban is one of the things being proposed. But I also have to say that this is not what is keeping us awake at night. I think in many that China is by and large a rational actor, and they also know that if we begin to see these exit bans being implemented on a more comprehensive basis, that this is something that would seriously dent confidence.
For multinational companies, this isn't an abstract problem. It's already a real-world dilemma. Recent tensions involving Chinese shipping giant COSCO and operations linked to the Panama Canal underscore how commerce and geopolitics are becoming increasingly intertwined. The EU's investment stock in China stood at 240 billion euros in 2024, with a big share coming from German giants like Volkswagen and major chemical players. Now they're being pulled in two directions. On the one side, EU laws on sanctions, export controls, and supply chain due diligence are getting stricter. That can mean cutting ties with certain Chinese suppliers, moving production, or limiting technology transfers. On the other side is China. The new regulations suggest that companies reducing their China exposure for geopolitical reasons could face consequences inside the Chinese market. If a German car maker decided to shift part of its electric vehicle supply chain out of China to comply with EU rules on sourcing battery materials, it could run into trouble. Chinese authorities might view that move as politically driven. The car maker could see delays in regulatory approvals, pressure on its joint ventures, or even restricted access to the Chinese market. If it doesn't adjust, it could fall foul of EU rules at home.
China's leader, Xi Jinping, believes that China's industrial and manufacturing base, which is the largest in the world, as we all know, is China's main sort of insurance policy against any sort of externally induced shocks or disruptions, including geopolitical tensions. And so they've been trying to sanction-proof the economy and pursue greater self-sufficiency or self-reliance across really a wide range of industries and technologies. For example, semiconductors. Security and resilience come first, economic growth and development come second.
Is China still integrating with the global economy or reshaping it around itself? China says it's open for business, but blocking Meta's acquisition of Manus has spooked foreign tech firms. Critics say these new rules scaling back decoupling send a different message. Foreign investment is welcome, but only on China's terms.